maybe.
He's thinking about it.
And Jennifer.
Hey, hello, Ben.
Hello, welcome. Hi, Oren.
Hello.
Hey, Warren.
I wore orange for you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Good medicine for me this morning, Warren. Should have done that myself.
It's okay, the rest of your house is.
How can I? Such good news, Ben. I just sent a text, email.
Oh, yes.
Very happy about your increase.
Happy to be in a fuller role. It's good.
So are we all.
Welcome, Heather.
Can't see Heather. See.
Hi, Joanne. I'm expecting about 24 people on the call, so, you know, give or take, 23 or 25, that's what we're expecting. Justine, when we get to a good time to start, do you want to kind of take the lead there? Thanks. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Lauren, Arlene, Karen, Margaret, from all around.
Ben, do you want to give it one more minute, but still holding that time is precious? You can start soon. Is that okay?
Just, one more minute. Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My little bar pops up that your internet is unstable comes up. So that's always a great way to start a meeting. My name's Justine Johnson, for those who I haven't met. I'm the Associate Director at Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center in Bangor, Pennsylvania. And I've also, during this time, taken on an additional role supporting Ben and the Retreat Center collaboration. Usually I'm behind the scenes taking notes and connecting with others. But this morning we received a call from Teresa that something unexpected had happened, and it challenged us to pivot and be agile in this response. So we're hoping to reschedule Teresa and her important work on grounding us in responses to grief and trauma. And knowing that this is a really important conversation, still wanted to meet this afternoon and have a community dialogue about what does that look like? How is that emerging for us and our community? So individual and collective trauma and grief. But I think because we are pivoting in a way in this afternoon session to kind of reschedule, we have time for introduction. So I'm hoping people can introduce themselves, especially because we have some new faces today. If you could, your name, your connection to the Retreat Center collaboration and or Retreat Center community partnership, and maybe one word to encapsulate all of the feelings you may be having at this current time. So again, my name's Justine Johnson. I'm at the Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center, and I'm feeling hopeful. And do we all want to do popcorn style? I think that's how we've been doing. Yes, I already see nods. Okay. So I am going to invite Kitty into the conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kitty Uppard Chase. I am co-director with my husband, Rick, of Stony Point Retreat and Conference Center in the lower Hudson River Valley. And unfortunately, I have to be on a different Zoom at 2 o'clock, so I'm just here for a little bit, but I really wanted to connect with you all. I went to one of the gatherings last year at Kirkridge, I guess in May, and you know, when I first started here as co-directors in 2008, there was a network called OECOSnet. That was sort of the previous iteration of this, and it was on its way out. And I have been wanting resurrection of it somehow, and this is even more than what that was. So I'm very grateful and glad to be with you all. And I invite Rachel.
Hi, Kitty. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Plattis. I'm calling from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm connected to the Retreat Center collaboration through my work with Nuns and Nuns. And so I'm not a Retreat Center operator, and am really grateful to be in community with all of you, and happy to see your faces today. And I'm feeling grounded. Sure. And I will pass it to Margarita.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margarita Solis-Deal, director at Dominican Center here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's good to see everybody. My connection with the Retreat Center collaboration is that I am part of the steering committee and the core team, and just really present to the energy that all of you bring. So I think that's more my connection. And so I think the one word I'm feeling right now is peaceful. And I invite Arlene.
All right, that mute thing gets you every time. Hi, everybody. Arlene Peterson. I am with the Ancilla Domini Sisters, which is also the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ. We are located in Plymouth, Indiana, just on the northern part of Indiana. I became affiliated with the Retreat Collaborative through the Roots to Reach initiative with the Fetzer Institute. And so just been excited. I'm also brand new to my role here at Ancilla Domini Sisters as a part of a larger ministry of work. And we actually have probably multiple retreat center areas besides our mother house here for our sisters. We have a retreat center called Lindenwood, which I'll let somebody tell you about that. And then a one called Moon Tree. And so I am hopeful. And so, of course, then I'm going to pick Paul.
Thanks, Shelley. Paul Bach. I'm with Lindenwood Retreat and Conference Center in Plymouth, Indiana. about a half hour south of South Bend is a good way to locate us. And came on as Arlene found out about it. She said it'd be a great thing for me to be part of, so I'm jumping on to get to know what other people are doing. My word originally was probably going to be hopeful, but also, I guess, excited also. I'm excited what we can be and what we can do differently with hopefully people's mind shifts in how life is nowadays. Let's go to Heather.
Hey, Paul, thanks. I'm Heather Johnson. I'm the executive director at the Whidbey Institute, and we're just north of Seattle. And I'm just feeling really grateful. So many layers and directions, feeling so darn grateful. Yeah. And I'm going to hand this to Oren.
Hello, I'm Oren. I'm the executive director of Commonweal, which is about an hour north of San Francisco, though geography and location don't mean much anymore because in Zoom we're all in the same space. I'm kind of exhausted by the roller coaster of the amount of suffering and inequities and death that's happening around the world. At the same time, these budding signs of hope and change and opportunity. So it's just exhausting riding this all the time. And I'm on the steering committee, and I am on the core committee with Jean and Margarita. And I might as well pass it to Jean.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jean Richardson, and I serve with Margarita and Lauren on the core committee and the steering committee. I'm the director of Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center in Pennsylvania. And I think my word is tender. I got word, we have word this week that one of our board members has one of those raging cancers and is passing away. And it's like one of those things, like it's the most unlikely person that you would think of. And so I'm really feeling how tender we are as humans walking on this earth. And the virus has just even made it more so. But so I am going to pass it to Joanne.
Hey everybody, my name is Joanne Gates, and I am the director of the Knobs Haven Retreat Center in Central Kentucky. It is on the grounds of the Sisters of Loretto Mother House, and we have another retreat area here called Cedars of Peace, which is a cluster of 7 cabins for individuals for long or shorter long-term solitude. I'm connected here because Susan, the other director, attended a collaborative of retreat center directors about a year ago, and I'm just riding on her coattails here. I think, I don't know what the word would be, but maybe the visual would be like somebody wearing suspenders and you're getting pulled up, like pulled higher. And I will pass this to, how about Karen?
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Sevenoff. I'm part of the team at Copper Beach Mindfulness Institute in West Hartford, Connecticut. And I was brought to this group through Gabriella, who is a part-time team member, grant writer for us. And she attended one of the retreat collaborative gatherings sponsored by Fetzer, I believe, and connected Brandon Nappy and myself to this group. I'm happy to be here, and I think my word is, yeah, supported. Supported. Thank you. I'll pass it along to Lauren.
Good afternoon. I'm Lauren Buck. I'm a part of the Roots to Reach collaborative as the executive director and minister of Empower Institute in St. Louis. I'm feeling heavy, like some anxiety, but yet assured that we'll get out on the other side of this. And I will pass it to Jennifer. Did you go?
It's Jennifer Stowell, not yet.
Okay, well, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Stowell. I'm the director of the Retreat Center at Commonweal, working with Orrin, and I'm on the steering committee. And the advantage of going after several other people have gone is that I could ditto everyone in what you've said. And I'm also unable to find one word, honestly. So I will echo Orrin in recognizing the exhaustion of the seesaw of going from horror to gratitude to appreciation, as Jean said, of the tenderness of the time. So I feel all these things, and the upshot of it all at this moment, and increasingly, is a grounded sense of being present. And it's almost as though our consciousnesses are being expanded in order to hold the extremes of all of these circumstances. And I feel a great gratitude that the truth is being spoken more than it was at the beginning of this virus crisis. So that is a circular answer of a mix of emotions that's allowing a certain sense of presence, for which I'm very grateful. And I will move to not being able to see all who's on here. Ben, do you share in these meetings? Yeah?
Indeed, I do, Jennifer. Indeed, I do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, like you, I can echo many of these feelings. And for me, the upshot is that tenderness that Jean spoke of, that I feel like I've been tugged and pulled and smashed. And yet there's a beauty in gathering together to talk about that and to be on the same page with each other. There's something very beautiful there. So I feel tender in these spaces. Appreciate being a part of this. I'm the collaborator for the Retreat Center collaboration, Ben Scott-Brandt. I would like to pass it to Michelle Gossman, if I can.
Thank you, Ben. I'm Michelle Gossman. I direct the Transformation Spirituality Center in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I'm connected to the initiative. I'm on the steering committee. And I think my word today is pensive. As many of you are in back-to-back Zoom meetings, I am too. And I just left one with a group of people who raised the question about, are we experiencing the limits of growth? And a question was asked, will this pandemic help people understand the limits of growth? And the answer was probably not, because people will be immersed in the immediate pain, the immediate job loss, and the things that are right before them. And they'll look to places like Facebook or possibly other dubious news sources for ways to find good guys and bad guys, and not for ways to find solutions. And the last thing that was said was that it will probably be up to people like us to help people understand and work through those things without the demonizing influence of trying to find the white hats and the black hats, or however you want to identify that. So that's where I am, pensive, but feeling like there's an invitation there, an important invitation for people of good heart like this group. And I am, AR, have you gone?
I have not. Sorry, let me just turn on my video. I'm having a bad beard day. So I'm feeling very conscious about my beard, although I have orange seal of approval on it. So that always feels good. I hope everyone's doing really well. It's lovely to see you all. I'm here in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm a member of the Retreat Center Collaborative Steering Committee. We had a wonderful meeting just a few days ago. And it's so good to see so many friends here on the call. We're just, I'm based here at Yale, and so there's been a lot of talk about programming and what's going to be happening in the years to come. We have a faculty meeting actually in just a few minutes, so I'm going to have to jump off, and we'll try to jump back on again. But yeah, I think there's a lot of I think all the words and emotions used have been very, very much around what colleagues are feeling, particularly those who are working with students. And we had some interesting conversations about programming with another group I'm working with this morning, and it's around this it's around the sense of where do we go from here. One of the things that came out of our meeting the other day, and we might discuss it here, is I've been thinking a lot about stories and how we tell the story of people who are in this group and who are doing the amazing work that you do, particularly with centers and spaces. And how is it that we can create a more robust and compelling narrative around this vital work, so that I guess so people recognize that these places, like Jean often talks about, these national parks for the soul, continue to remain vital and open and vibrant. That is part of the fabric of our world and our society and our country. That's really important. So I've been thinking a lot about that, about how to tell that story, and I'm hoping to have some bandwidth once online commencement is done next Monday, to maybe think about this with some of you. But other than that, sending lots of prayers and love to all of you at this wild time. And has everyone gone?
We have Mark, Margaret, and Margaret left.
Margaret, let's do it.
Either one can go first and pass it to the next if you'd prefer.
Well, there are two of us. That's good news. I am here in San Rafael, California, close to Commonweal, not so far, and was thinking about how grateful I am to have found this group, and realizing this morning as I listen, I have great memories of being at Cedars of Peace and Whidbey Island, and thinking of, with gratitude, about how these centers and those that you represent have played a part in my own life. And now I find myself here a little over 10 years as director of Santa Sabina Center in San Rafael. I think in the moment, I recognize, I think Jennifer talked about the array of feelings that have been expressed, and I can certainly relate to those. And I'm feeling gratitude just to be alive, and somewhat anxious about how, when, what will be next, and trying to sort through how we can serve, I think, online, but how we can again serve as refuges in ways that can be effectively handled and safely handled, and working with staff who have varying degrees of anxiety. It's really complex. And so I think there is a roller coaster. The planning function is one, the sorting out function is one, and then dealing with the emotional level of upheaval that goes on for people as we deal with our individual reverberations in this time, and the fears of anticipating opening or not opening, not even opening, but being more as a center, but being more involved as an opening publicly starts to happen. And I'm kind of reverberating from those emotions that I've experienced from my staff. So it's I'm grateful for this group to have found you all. Thank you. And so I would turn to Margaret.
It's good to be here with you all. I'm Margaret Cooley. I'm the Executive Director of Woolman Hill Quaker Retreat Center in Western Massachusetts, small retreat center. I've been the director there for about 15 or 16 years. And Jean Richardson will have no recollection of this, but as I was going through a period of self-doubt and mission seeking in my own life, Jean was a person I called to find out what it was like to be the director of a retreat center. So that was probably 16, 18 years ago. I called her out of the blue. I'm also part of the Western Massachusetts Retreat Association. So we have a group of retreat centers in this area that connect a couple of times a year in person and other times by email. So that's been a rich part of mutual support. I would say I am probably less spiritually grounded than some of you sound like you are, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed by all of the learning curves and the emotional roller coasters, as some have said, and at the same time feeling a sense of yearning. I think it was Michelle that used the word invitation. I think some of that yearning for a better way, for this to be an opportunity for us to recenter and re-identify what the core needs to be for our society as well as our internal grounding. So glad to be with you all.
Thanks, Margaret. And I believe we have Mark just joined, Mark Weiss and Mark Piper. So if you two could introduce yourselves, that'd be wonderful.
Hi, I'll go. This is Mark Weiss in Garrison, New York. Just recently, formerly of the Garrison Institute. Yes, it's, a challenging time of, we've talked about this on these calls before of if the governor lifts the pause on June 15th, will people show up on June 16th? Will they show up on July 16th? Today, they just announced that Broadway theaters will be closed until September. So, apparently they have some trepidation giving up one of their busiest seasons of the year, but they felt it was the right thing to do. The staff is certainly concerned about what does it look like to have people coming in from all over the world and being in close quarters. So, being supportive of one another, and even though I've been away from the Institute for a couple of weeks now, there's still, we're still in constant communication, supporting one another personally and professionally. So an anxious time, no doubt. Oh, and the other thing is not to end on a depressing note, but I'm kind of the feeling that at some point or another, we will all get this virus to one degree or another. I don't see how, we escape it. It's just so omnipresent everywhere. And what does that all look like? So.
Well, I think I'll round us out. My apologies for my camera and sound. I'm at the office today and not at home and forgot my good webcam. But my name is Mark Piper. I am on month number 11 of being the director of the Senecal Retreat and Conference Center in Chicago, Illinois. Unlike most of you, I'm just a run-of-the-mill director of a retreat center. And my affiliation with the RCC is primarily through Crystal Chan, the assistant director here at the Conference Center, who has been involved with the Fetzer Institute and some of its appendages over the years. I don't want to end on a feeling of sadness, so I'll be a little more dramatic and a little more wistful and say that of all the feelings I'm feeling, melancholy is the one today as we discern what we have to do with our staff here at the center for the time being. So melancholy.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. It was good. We haven't done an introduction in a while, so I think it was nice to name and place people. Although, Oren, I'm holding on to what does geography mean at this point, and it means a lot, and it means nothing as we meet virtually. And the other thing I noted, I wrote down everyone's kind of one or several words, is that we're holding a lot of emotions, whether it's good or bad, and good and bad. I think these feelings and these times are complex. So if you'll just give me a moment to breathe in deep and ground ourselves in this conversation, so you can breathe in and exhale however you want, I'll just give you a moment to do that. So as you come back to this space, hopefully a little bit more grounded, but if not, maybe a bit more present. I'm grateful for all of you here today. I'm grateful for the Retreat Center collaboration. And I think I will pass it quickly off to Ben for some announcements to start the meeting, if you will, Ben.
Sure. Now that I'm feeling calmed, I can just briefly state a few announcements. I wanted to put out there that we're recording our community calls each week. We're having these calls weekly now, and we were recording them all along, but now we have a blog on our website. So I'm posting the videos to our blog, which is really helpful for centers that are maybe not as tech savvy. They can just pop in and push one button and the video plays. But it does require us to all recognize that our likenesses are being shared on the internet for time immemorial. So I do want to make sure that we announce at the beginning of each call that I am recording the video, but if anyone has other concerns about that or things that we should talk more through, please let me know if you have a concern. I do want to make sure that that's working for everyone in our collaboration. Related to that, we have a couple other projects that we're working on that both involve surveys, ways that we can engage with each other to come up with ideas that work for the whole of us. One of them is our digital resource library that we're working to develop. So what should that look like? What would we like to share? We have a survey that we're working on where we are accepting your input as Retreat Center leaders. So I'll share that link in a second. And then we're also doing a survey of all the centers who are involved in our collaboration so that we can list you in an interactive map and show a little pin where your center is. But we can't do that without folks filling out a survey that tells where their center is and who they are and where they're located. So we have a survey for that as well. So I'll be putting those in the chat box and you can find those links in a minute. I'm talking right now, so I'm not going to try to do both at once. I think there's one other announcement that I wanted to mention, which is that the pressing need that a lot of us are talking about is about a baseline criteria for re-entry into our spaces or for getting guests to re-enter. And I'm hearing that from across our collaboration. And so several of us are working on pooling our resources and coming up with some kind of document that we can share out to the rest of the group. So I just want you to know that that work is being started, that we hear and recognize the importance of that, and that we are not just talking about it, that there's also projects being done behind the scenes. We don't have much to share right now. I'm pulling in things from Maine and Illinois and Massachusetts. What are our thoughts? What guidelines have been released? What haven't? What are coming out tonight? So if you get something from your state or something from your region that is helping you make decisions, send a copy of it to me, send a link to me, and I'll add that to the document that I'm compiling. I think those are my announcements, Justine.
Great, thank you. So I put the link to the mapping survey in the chat box because Ben was chatting. And there's also another reminder. A couple weeks ago, Sister Jane Marie and Eve, who have been supporting the Retreat Center collaboration, has also asked for a resource library survey. So I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. We received about 7 7 complete surveys, and there are so many more of us. We really want to gather a diverse response to understand what does a resource or living library look like to a retreat center collaboration. So I'm going to put that in the chat box as well.
I also want to make the point that you don't have to be a retreat center to fill out either of these surveys. If you're a part of our collaboration and we're sharing resources, then your voice is valued in both of these surveys.
Thanks, Ben. Absolutely. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I'll just reiterate for those who joined a little late, Teresa was supposed to be joining us and she had something come up a couple hours ago. So Margarita, Ben, and I met very quickly and said, how do we still honor this space for those who maybe are experiencing individual grief and loss, or collectively for the retreat centers and the communities they serve? We wanted to be authentic in that and not quickly put something together or divert into a different plan. So Ben and I just had recently pulled up grief poems, and I've invited Ben to share his and maybe give a little context about that. And then I'll invite Margarita to ask some questions that are prompted from this conversation.
I don't know how this has been for some of you. Maybe you have held online gatherings to talk about sort of the difficulty of these times in your community. I don't work at a retreat center, so I'm not sure what you're doing, but I come from an interfaith organizing background. So I was tapped last week to contribute to an interfaith sort of COVID-themed memorial service where we were talking about our shared grief as a community, and a university community around COVID and its impact on us. And so I was asked to share a poem. And so I read a poem, and then other people read prayers. They read passages from scriptures. Many faith backgrounds represented. And it was a beautiful way to process, and it was much more cathartic than I expected. So I just decided I would read the same poem that I chose for that with you, just as a way to sit with this sensation. This is a poem from Mary Oliver. People have conflicted feelings about Mary Oliver's poetry. I'm a big fan. Some people are not. This song is called Hurricane. It didn't behave like anything you had ever imagined. The wind tore at the trees. The rain fell for days, slant and hard. The back of the hand to everything. I watched the trees bow and their leaves fall and crawl back into the earth, as though that was that. This was one hurricane I lived through. The other one was of a different sort and lasted longer. Then I felt my own leaves giving up and falling, the back of the hand to everything. But listen now to what happened to the actual trees. Toward the end of that summer, they pushed new leaves from their stubbed limbs. It was the wrong season, yes, but they couldn't stop. They looked like telephone poles and didn't care. And after the leaves came blossoms. For some things, there are no wrong seasons, which is what I dream of for me. I like the idea of changing that last word to us to talk about the communities that we come from, which is what I dream of for us. Where does that take you?
I just thank you, Ben, for that beautiful poem. And as we reflect on grief, it's not very difficult to reflect on this topic on a day-to-day basis, I don't think, with what we're dealing with, just how people expressed how they introduce themselves. There's a thread that's weaving in all of us, I believe, a sense of grief. We may call it different things. We might express it using different words. And it's a tension, a balancing act has been described, where the whipping of the rain, the falling of the leaves, the backhand image, yet the growth that emerges, or the life that emerges from that. Sometimes it's really tough to see the life when you're in the midst of such grief. And so we just open it up, as we said, with Teresa not being here with us and her ability to lead us through a conversation around trauma and grief and healing, which all are so connected, as we know, as retreat people. But we go through it too. Not only do we facilitate it for others, but we go through it too. And so the question and the invitation is, how is grief showing up in your retreat spaces or in your spaces? And in many ways, how you're responding to that. So give some thought to that, just to model an answer. Yesterday, I meet with our staff on a daily basis. And yesterday, we were talking about not going back anytime soon. And it was the first time, I think, that the sense of tears, I mean, I felt a sense of sadness, but actually I shed tears while I was trying to talk about that, of not going back and opening up the chapel door, or not going back and opening up the conference center for an early group of people, or not going back to bump into one of the sisters trying to get through one of the spaces. I mean, it was a tough conversation. So grief is now starting to really show up in a really different way for me. As I lead a staff to the unknown, as well as to come out in life. How do we come out of it in a new way? So I invite you to share your story around that. Thank you, Ben, for that beautiful poem.
The gratitude that I'm feeling, just before our call with Caesar, and getting grounded with data, I know I was spinning in the how do we make wise and discerning decisions on behalf of our teams and as organizational leaders when we're just swimming in a field of gaslighting, not having data. And certainly the truth of we're learning more every day, there's truth in that. But when there's active dismantling of reality, to be carrying the anxiety of everyone's need to have clarity, that is what I was watching myself really implode under. And then when we had our conversation with Caesar, the information is painful to take in. The reality of it is hard. And I felt a ground that I hadn't been having. And I have this sense of like a new, I was really hearing in our team too, the sense of like all these things, how we were doing particular things are like, we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to particular ways of how we've been doing things. And so with that, I wrote a poem. We recorded it thinking that we would share it with for Give Big. We just had our fundraising week last week, our regional fundraising, and we were going to share it with that. But then when it came down to it, it didn't feel like a right fit. It's more of a thank you. And if you in the service of poetry, I would love to share that because it came through in service, and because the ground that we developed here. And it's, for the sake of throwing a title on it, it's called In This Time. But in this time of deep disruption, what are you feeling and experiencing? What are you seeing and understanding? What are you hearing and what are you listening for? What will you carry forward? Through this time of deep disruption, who will you become? How will you do and be differently? I feel within myself this deep plea. May I allow myself to be disrupted enough. May I, layer by layer, let go. Let go of ideas and stories about what must be true, what must happen. Let go of actions that are ultimately distractions. Let go of needs that are not truly needs after all. Let go of hurts that my heart is longing to heal beyond. Let go of noise. To listen. Listen for what is real. Listen for what is necessary. Listen for what truly requires attention, love, care, and commitment. May we allow this time to disrupt us enough that life may live. May we listen. May we see. May we open. May we grieve. May we heal. May we yet become a people that life is challenging and inviting us to become. And through this time of deep disruption, how will you do and be differently? What will you carry forward? And who will you become?
Thank you, Heather. I think sharing what you're doing is amazing, and then also giving us those questions to sit with. I think early on too, when we talked about today, if you do have resources or anything you'd like to share that's been helping you, if it's a poem or a letter you've written, you are welcome to share that in the space. So Heather, thank you for role modeling that.
Anybody else like to lean into that a little bit? Justine, would you like to share the poem that you had ready for today, or?
Sure. So as we all kind of sit, and I think that silence is wonderful. I think we're all sitting with a lot. I too had a Mary Oliver poem as a backup, so I'm pro Mary Oliver Ben. But I also have a David White poem, and Well of Grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning downward through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those wishing for something else. In our search, so a little bit about Kirkridge, and maybe Jean, if you want to add on, we had identified that grief would be something people would want or maybe not know they wanted to explore. And so we invited a facilitator in to host a virtual circle, 90 minutes on grief and loss and some shadow work for a circle of trust. So it's happening on Thursday, and we hadn't ever
at the beginning, someone mentioned hope. At it's almost like the little still voice, the irrepressible voice at the bottom of the well. surges forth like those leaves on the pole of the tree, burst forth when you least expect it, but it's in the depths of the quiet, in the depths of the grief. There's some little surge of anticipation and hope. Maybe not that the cup can pass, but that life persists. And so in this moment, that's what I want to rest in. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. See, people are also leaving pieces of poetry or sections of books or works in the chat. So if that feels more comfortable to you as well. Again, if you are just sitting in what you need to sit in, that's wonderful. And sharing is, of course, by invitation.
I really appreciate that, the poem and the questions, Justine. And yesterday I found myself doing, as many of us do, back-to-back calls. And I found myself for the first time in a call with people who were thinking that this was a conspiracy, didn't understand why we needed to wear masks, spoke of kindness, but just a very strong difference of opinion. And I was exhausted when I got off this call. And I think that if we don't allow ourselves to feel the grief and to feel the loss, we can't get authentically to the other side. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel the grief, it sneaks us up on us in ways that we don't expect. And I could feel myself getting upset with something really small today, and all the little gnawing voices, that I'm not enough and I'm not working hard enough, and it's not really going to work out, and there's not enough money, and all this little, the whole scarcity thing. I think it came from not dealing with the grief. To say, I'm just really damn sad right now. There isn't a fairness to this life that I could grab my hands around. And I think what I love about all of our work is that we create spaces for people to be honest. We create spaces that have safety nets where they can speak their fears and speak their grief and speak their anxiety in truthful and loving ways. And retreat centers and safe places, no matter how you define that safe place, do that for people, whether it's a therapist's office or a healing circle or just a safe place to walk. People can hear their own voices, and I feel like that's why our work is important and why it will appear again on the other side. So I just don't, I think we have to, and I think as leaders, Margarita, we have to model it. We have to model that it's just really hard to open the chapel door, or hard not to think about, bumping into a coworker or having another bowl of oatmeal together. It's just hard not to think about that. And it just may not be. And like you, Heather, having that conversation with Caesar really grounded me in what really was, I think, on our horizon, so that I could let go of kind of false hope and false sense that we'll just pull out of it and be unscathed. It's not going to happen. We're in for a long haul, and I think one of the things that we can't see as retreat centers is what it is, in fact, we might be called to do with our spaces that we never dreamed would happen. So, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jane. I had a beautiful conversation this morning with a friend who grew up on the Navajo reservation, who doesn't live there anymore, and we talked about homesickness. And I am thinking about that on this call with you all, and thinking about this conversation that that I'm just coming from about how we, in a moment in which our relationships with each other are restricted in so many ways, how we open up into relationship with place, and how complicated that is when these places that we take care of and offer to so many people we're not able to. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about the ways in which, in my homesickness, being across the country from where most of my loved ones are, I am finding that that relationship that I'm forming with this place that I'm in, even though it's not my home place, is a container for a lot of my grief. Yeah, and I'm wondering about, and I think I've said this on something similar to this on calls with some of you, but wondering about how for a group of people who are kind of experts about places, how to support folks right now in their grief, in being connected to places, and how that can be a place for grief to go. So, not fully formed, but something that I'm thinking about, because I think homesickness actually is so much of the root of a lot of the grief that I'm hearing, at least from my beloveds. Yeah. And I'm going to have to hop off in a minute, but it's really beautiful to be with all of you.
I'll jump in. A few disconnected thoughts. I want to first acknowledge that for me, this group this morning has been deeply healing and deeply heartening. For me, that includes the welcoming of periods of silence, and the beautiful choices of poetry, and in my own experience, which, as I said, included so much seesawing between emotions and exhaustion and gratitude and a sense of increasingly growing a capacity to be present in an evolving way. You've all helped me with your comments this morning begin to comprehend the developing Polaroid, as I often call it, of what I am feeling. And for me, a sense of homesickness, to use your word, Rachel, has to do with a homesickness for the place within myself that will not turn away from what I feel and what I sense is real for the culture and what's happening. And a phrase that I've heard for the last 2 months within myself when the tide is up and things feel overwhelming is the word "stay right there." And for me, that has something to do with what the gold coins mean, and something to do with how I hope that we, our evolving species, can become more and more the best part of being human for each other and ourselves through this impossible crises.
Jennifer, I can't tell if you're finished or if you froze.
All the joys of Zoom land. The boxes move, the boxes get dark. It's such a joy.
Did Oren go offline too?
Yeah, he had to go. He had to leave. Yeah. Joanne, we invite you to share your thoughts. Yeah.
Thanks, Margarita. This conversation is so helpful to me because I'm usually so busy dysfunctionally carrying everybody else's emotion that when I wake up to my own, it's like, oh, yeah. What I realize is that the primary focus or place of my grief, I think, has been around my father, who I'm sure, like many of your beloveds, is in a nursing facility at this time. And he was moved to a higher level of care on the very day that we were told that we couldn't come back. And getting my head around that reality has been difficult. He's okay. But there has been a lot of grief in that for me. With everything else, I don't mean the suffering, but I feel like I have been waiting for this enormous shoe to drop for so long. Like, not that a virus would be coming, but that, you know, the climate is collapsing, the economy, all of the systems are collapsing. And so now that it is, I mean, that it's visible to more people, I think I feel a little bit of relief. That must sound, well, I don't know how it sounds. It feels uncharitable, but I'm aware that it's like witnessing in oneself or witnessing in another who is addicted, witnessing somebody beginning to hit bottom and saying, oh, maybe this behavior isn't serving me. And so while it's hard to see the suffering, hard to anticipate what will be coming, there is a part of me that feels relieved that other people are beginning to wake up to a reality that every one of us on this call has seen coming.
Thanks, Joanne. I see a lot of heads nodding in support of many things you said. So thank you.
I think when people were describing being hopeful, it was kind of, oh, is somebody talking, Ben? I always looked to Ben like he knew. Ben, do you know all the secrets of Zoom and who talks? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So when people were talking about being hopeful, and I'm thinking about retreat centers and thinking about what Michelle was kind of talking about in her reflection, it's such a tension, right? We so know that people are looking for these spaces, these beautiful spaces that we have, that we're in, that we gravitate towards, and that we have all these beautiful ideas for programming, and especially for a grieving community. Yet we are in that tension of how do we keep them? How do we keep them? And I think that's to remain hopeful is such it's like that wind that you talked about, Ben. It's just like, how do you hang on through the storm to know that perhaps, as Michelle was talking about, an invitation that people are going to be looking to us for grounding or for some of that understanding, I suppose. I don't know what the right question is, but how do we, it's not even how do we, but that there's no answer to that. I get that we're all in that tension, but I think that's why we are hanging on to them, because we know that others, that the need is going to be there. The need is going to be there, and is there. It's just, how can we open it up for people to enter in the door?
I have a not completely formed thought, but I'll share it anyway. A nascent thought, how's that? About how in that image of the coins at the bottom of the well, those were things of value that were released by people, let go of, possibly with a hope of something else to come. How is that going to play out with all of us individually and collectively in our retreat spaces? We've asked those questions before. What needs to die for things to regenerate? And I don't have an answer to it, but it just invigorated the question in my heart and in my mind. What does it mean to let go of something of value in the service of hope?
That's a beautiful question. Can you say that again? I just love that question.
What does it mean to let go of something of value in the service of hope?
Thank you, Michelle. Paul, this is your first time with us? Okay. I was just like, welcome to this conversation. If it was your first time, we're glad that you're in the call. Mark, were you going to say something?
I was just going to thank Michelle for that comment and just say that that's a question that's been resonating with me quite a bit over the past few months. So thank you for that.
But I will say something since you brought me forward, but no, this is about my third call. So, but it's interesting because I did work for a cemetery at one time, and people deal with grief in different ways. And I think for some people, you can look at it as a resurrection experience, that the death is going to bring about new life, as you were talking about with the coins. What are you willing to give up to get somewhere else in that? So some people are looking at it that way. Others avoid death and anything connected to it. They won't show up at a funeral, even if it's a family member, and they won't come and experience that because they think if I avoid it, I don't have to deal with it. And I think that's where we have a number of people that are trying to say this isn't a loss or grief, but they're being very stressful and being very, it comes out in other ways then. You can say, well, I don't feel that, but you can see it in the people that it's coming out in different ways other than grief and loss, because they're denying that that's what they're dealing with. And instead, they're bringing it out in stress and anger and many things that they're dealing with in life and that. And so it's helping those people understand what they're feeling. And in going through divorce also, it's, you have to face the cloud to see the silver lining. And we have to look at that silver lining. But if we avoid the cloud and don't walk through it, we bring in all these other things that are going to affect who we are and what we do. And if we can walk through it instead of around it, we deal with it and continue to move forward in a new direction then. And that. So as hard as it is to go into a dark cloud, sometimes we need to, or we'll never see the silver lining of what we're going towards. And that. So.
Paul, I really agree with you about, having to go through it. And that's what I think, we can help be for people, is to be that safe place when they do go through it. And one of the things that I'm experiencing in these retreat center calls is that just because of our own financial situations and or our own staffing patterns, or when COVID hit our geographical area, we're going through it at different times. And one of the great things that we can offer each other is just to hold the space for each other as we go through it, because some people have more financial support than others, some don't, but also this having to deal with it with staff, it comes in waves and bits, and so we're still going through the cloud for sure.
I was on a phone call yesterday with some friends of mine, and two are nurses. And while this didn't happen to them directly, they were sharing stories that nurses are sharing with each other. Yeah, one of the stories just really saddened me tremendously, how some health professionals are really are looked at as not being able to be welcomed into spaces. And so some nurses have been denied to come into the grocery store because of their exposure, which I get, that fear right away just says, but I just was like, I just never, when they told me that, I didn't hear it before that. You guys might have heard something, that similar story, but that was my first. And I think about that, and as I was talking to the staff about that, I said, this is why we exist. I mean, how do we invite people in? I mean, we start a call like this and say, hey, Teresa can't join us, and she had an incident that happened, and we get right into the conversation of this piece, right? And we know it's in a safe space, and so we know the value of this, of the shift. And so how do we hang on to that? And that's what I think, Michelle, your question was just so, I just love the questions. Like, how do we come up with just the questions? And perhaps, we've all heard that the answer is probably in the question somewhere. Just love those questions. And I didn't know what to ask after I heard that story. man, we're really messed up. Is all I kept saying. And I just like, where's the, but I get it. It's that fear. It's that the underlining fear that another group is now being discriminated against. They just can't make it up. Okay, Justine, Ben?
Yeah, well, Margaret, I just want to, for the last couple of people who have spoken, shared their vulnerabilities, I just wanted to say thank you. I think for me, this process early on was making sure I didn't work out of a place of fear. And then I had to really sit in what that meant. And I had to sit in knowing that, okay, I am afraid and I am fearful. So rather than denying that, and Jean and I talk constantly at Kirkridge, and we talk constantly about shifting. How do we work from scarcity but shift that into abundance? How do we work out of a place of groundedness and not fear, and realize that that's very true to our stories in this current time? So I just want to pay gratitude to those who have shared those vulnerable stories as well. I do have a last couple of things to mention, and I thought I'd close with an additional poem. Ben, I don't know if you want to say anything or if there are any last words by anyone.
I just wanted to mention that next week our call will be on best practices for policies at retreat centers, and Mark Piper will be leading that, and he has an amazing agenda put together. He's done a ton of homework, so we're looking forward to that call.
Thanks, Ben. So we do have 10 more minutes, but I think I'll close out and then just stay on and just be with people if they want or need that. But I would like to close with a poem by Joy Harjo, the U.S. Poet Laureate. Once the world was perfect. Once the world was perfect, and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent became a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head. And once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thoughts jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given, for inspiration, for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, and hatred put out the light. No one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark. And now we had no place to live, since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. A spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. A Wind Clan person climbed out first into the world. And then the other clans, the children of those clans, their children and their children, all the way through time. To now, into this morning light with you. I had shared earlier that I was feeling hopeful, and I hope that poem brings us through the darkness into the light. Thank you all for joining. And again, as Ben said, we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, Justine and Ben.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So,